Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all fandoms, welcome to the Ferret Raccoon podcast, episode 156. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of December 2020 and the last normal/regular podcast of 2020. As this is going to be the last time I'm going to be doing a podcast where we generally just talk about news and trailers and things that have come out over the last couple of weeks or so. As if you didn't know, podcast 157, the next podcast, is going to be the, as we entitle it, best and worst of 2020 podcast. So I'll talk about that later on in the podcast, but let's get into the podcast because we've got quite a lot to talk about on this one. So much so that a lot of it got cut just for time's sake because I could easily see myself doing well over an hour in terms of talking about some of this stuff. And I should mention as well, if my voice does sound like a bit odd or, I sound too loud or too low, I guess I kind of have a cold as of right now. It's just a cold. And I did have a sore throat a couple of days ago, which I'm just recovering from. I made the very, very, very foolish mistake of not only taking my gloves off during one of the coldest days of the year so far, which, dried up my skin, but also was doing a lot of talking and shouting while being in said cold weather. So kind of my fault, but at least I've had a weekend to recover from that. But let's move on to things. I don't really have anything to talk about in terms of the general things I did over the last 2 weeks, mainly because I don't want to say because of the end of year podcast that we're going to be doing, and I'm going to be talking about some of the stuff then. And also because I just generally want to, not generally want to, I've been very busy. A lot of my time over the last 2 weeks has been spent preparing for the end of this year and also being ready for next year because a lot's going to be happening in terms of my life. And I guess I'll talk about that stuff possibly on the next podcast, and also you'll kind of, let's say, start to see that stuff. But I've been busy in terms of things that I've watched. I finished off one series, so that's good. But let's move on to stuff that happened over the last fortnight, and I kind of got a bit of a follow-up story from the last podcast where we were talking about Nintendo essentially giving the, tournament company Big House a cease and desist on the fact that they were going to stream Super Smash Bros. Melee via a online mod. And this one's kind of a weird one to talk about as it's mainly just speculation for the most part. Now I don't know what's going on. It could have been yes or no, who knows, but essentially what kind of happened was that in response to the massive upset that was, Nintendo coming in and cancelling this, tournament, which is a massive shame, there was going to be a Splatoon tournament which teams essentially registered under names, which they could decide any kind of name they wanted to register, to which a lot of them, in support of the Smash community, gave themselves specific names. I think two of the more notable ones being like Melee Nation and Melee Light, just kind of like, getting the message across into, that, we're not a fan of what Nintendo's doing for the most part. And it is kind of odd that, and it's also unclear as well. So I'm not saying that this is the reason. I'm not saying this isn't the reason. It is speculation, and I'm not going to say that it is or isn't, but it was unclear what exactly happened. But the live stream that was going to host this Splatoon tournament live stream just didn't happen and got cancelled, basically, which a lot of people suspect was because of the Melee-related names. Now, there is a somewhat silver lining for the most part, given the fact that the organisers Endgame TV hosted said Splatoon 2 tournament, as well as fans raising enough money or donating to essentially make the prize for actually winning the tournament one of the highest ever, conceived, way higher than anything Nintendo has ever offered in history. So there is a kind of silver lining, and it is nice to see two communities, Splatoon 2 and Melee, kind of come together in support of, what it all is about, and that's the games and the community. Something I'm not sure if Nintendo seems to realize or understand, because I wouldn't put it past Nintendo to actually pull the plug on the live stream. unfortunately. They have a really bad habit of coming across as the old man or the bad guy in a lot of cases. They do it a lot of the time with fan-made games based on their intellectual properties. They do it a lot with people who are trying to archive video games in general, more specifically their games. And there were a few other issues that Nintendo has kind of, not portrayed themselves in the best of light, which is quite sad at the end of the day. And it's very angry because Nintendo are kind of seen as the good guys to some extent. But you have to remember they are still a multi-billion-dollar corporation at the end of the day, which is a massive shame. But hey, hopefully Nintendo learns their lesson. If more people have to not buy their games, then so be it. But let's move on to news stories and topics. And the first kind of section we're going to talk about is regarding the Game Awards 2020. I'm going to say it right now. Do not care about the actual winners of the Game Awards. I don't know who won anything. I don't care. All I know is whoever did win most likely got robbed. But we're actually going to talk about what really matters with the Game Awards, and that's actually the reveal trailers, which, as far as I'm concerned, were kind of the best part of the show for the most part. No disrespect to the actual, hosting ability or production that went into whatever it looked like, but I think this was what really mattered, especially given what was shown off, which I was quite surprised and happy with. It wasn't just a bunch of sequels, which is kind of cool, although I am talking about a few sequels, I guess, technically. But I guess quickly mention I guess Sephiroth is in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Who cares? And let's talk about something that actually matters, being the cinematic and gameplay trailer for the game Back 4 Blood. Now, let's not beat around the bush here. I think the first thing people are going to say is this reminds them a lot of the Left 4 Dead series. And that's because it is pretty much coming from the creators of Left 4 Dead. Simply because they cannot make another Left 4 Dead game because I believe Valve owns the name and the game. So they teamed up with Warner Brothers to make a Left 4 Dead-like game in the spiritual successor, as a spiritual successor, I guess you could say. And, it's appropriately called, Back 4 Blood, maybe a slight jab at the fact that it's been gone for so long, or at Valve, I don't know. But I guess we'll start off with the cinematic trailer, which I liked. It definitely felt very Left 4 Dead-ish. The one thing I did note about the trailer itself, it definitely showcased, like the characters and the special effects you're going to go up against, is the fact that the characters, they seem a lot more prepared for this outbreak, which makes a lot of sense. The original cast in both Left 4 Dead games, they were kind of just caught in the midst of it and knew how to use guns, just surviving. So that's going to be very interesting to see if there's a slightly more strategy or combat theme, or how should I put it? There's an element to their dynamic for the most part, like they know what to do. They're, check the corners, make sure you got your grenade ready, that kind of stuff. I like the characters so far. I do think they are quite interesting. We just don't get a lot of their personality. I'm liking the special infected in this game. They have that weird four-armed one that kind of leaps at you. There's like this tank-esque one, and it seems like the special infected seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger, which leads me into the gameplay trailer, where you do kind of get to see the gameplay, and it's very reminiscent of Left 4 Dead, which is fine. I just hope they do a lot more to make it relevant and also different from the previous games. But yeah, like I said, I'm really interested in how big these special infected get, how exactly you take them out, how big of a threat are they, how hard do they hit, how hard can you hit, for the most part, because in the trailer they kind of just seem to deal with those things immediately. But we'll see. I'm really interested in this game. We are overdue for just a fun first-person shooter. The only real fun first-person shooters I can think of is definitely Shadow Warrior and Doom. That's about it. Every other first-person shooter doesn't really do it for me, in my opinion. But speaking of first-person shooters, maybe one of the biggest surprises that was shown off at the Game Awards was a new Perfect Dark game. We haven't seen Perfect Dark in about, good for you, since the last Perfect Dark game came out on Xbox 360, and that was, I think, a launch title, or close enough as a launch title, or at least released early. So we're talking about a game that is at least over 15 years old in terms of like when we last saw it. And it was just a cinematic trailer, which is fine. It basically established the fact that they are going to do something with the franchise. I don't blame Microsoft. If you haven't already noticed by now, Halo is pretty much finished. You know, I don't think that series is ever going to recover, in my opinion. Maybe they're trying to get a new IP. I mean, I don't want to sound fanboy here, but you got to admit, Microsoft doesn't really have a lot of strong IPs compared to its competitors, being Nintendo and Sony. So they might as well start bringing back franchises, especially as soon as they own the company Rare, who has such iconic characters, you know, like Banjo-Kazooie and such. But I don't know, we'll see how this one goes. Hopefully it doesn't come back and it's just a modern day first person shooter. Hopefully there's a lot of effort and care put into it. I hope it's not another remake, because if I remember correctly, the one that came out on 360 was a semi-remake. So here's hoping they actually do something with the rights. Here's hoping that, yeah, it all works out for them. The next trailer, another interesting one and another cinematic one, was the Callisto Protocol. I believe that's how you say it. I mean, we could be pronouncing it wrong. That's the way I've got it. If you want the spelling, it's Collisto. So, but this one is interesting. Pretty creepy cinematic trailer. We don't get much in this trailer, but there's enough there to intrigue you. And it does seem like, from the cinematic trailer, that this might be a little bit more of a isolated survival horror game, if it even is going to be that. And the reason I say that is because people are already speculating, and I think it's somewhat hinted at, that this is a Dead Space spiritual successor. I cannot say that word today for some reason. And the main reasons why is because I believe the creator, or one of the lead creators, is working on this game. And if I remember correctly, the writer of Dead Space a while ago teased that they're going to be showing off the new game he worked on. And I'm guessing this is this game. There's a lot of similarities between this and Dead Space. I don't know if it takes place in the same universe. Probably unlikely. But you kind of see the character in the, I guess, prison cell. And that's the other thing. Is it a prison? Who knows what it is? You see he kind of has like a implemented health bar thing on his neck. You kind of see the this hologram kind of thing kind of appear. There's like a Robocop-esque robot in the prison, or whatever this is. I'm guessing it's a prison. And that thing's kind of glitching out. And we don't know what's going on. Even the ending of the trailer is quite odd, because unfortunately our main character kind of gets killed, I'm presuming, by a pretty mutated monster looking thing. Like that, the thing of that design, we don't see much of it, but I'm digging that design. It's horrific. And we kind of just see that someone's watching that. And very odd. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm very intrigued in this game. If they can make something as good as Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2 in this day and age, something that's really survival horror, because the only people really doing survival horror right now is still Capcom with Resident Evil. Say what you want about Resident Evil 7, that game was survival horror. It was a return to form. Even Resident Evil Remake 1 and 2, those were survival horror games. Hopefully this game comes out and really kind of keeps the momentum going. Hopefully it'll release next to Resident Evil 8 or the Resident Evil 4 remake, and hopefully we'll see a real comeback of the genre, or horror sci-fi genre, because that's pretty much non-existent. And hopefully we'll see a real, I don't know, it's amazing what they can do with the power of I guess PlayStation 5 or PC, but I'm really, really, really interested in this game. And it's a shame as well, because if this game does turn out to be really good, I'm pretty sure EA is going to be slapping themselves for killing off the Dead Space franchise, because they let go of a lot of good talent. And speaking of talent, we have another game, another original one, mostly gameplay. It is called It Takes Two. Now this is another EA original-esque game that every now and then EA kind of does one of these, or kind of funds one of these games, which is always nice. I'm always happy that a company as big as EA will go and support someone who is much smaller than them to help them make their game. I always kind of get the feeling that they only ever do this just to make themselves seem a lot less evil, but hey, let's focus on the game. This is an interesting one. It kind of reminds me of Little Big Planet or The Puppeteer or some other kind of indie games I've seen where you kind of play as a sort of like toy-like character, because the main premise is this married couple or soon-to-be married couple. They kind of get turned into dolls or toys, and they kind of have to go through this fantasy world working together, I'm guessing, to like, you know, repair their relationship or their marriage or whatever, you know, to kind of get back home and, you know, turn back to human. And visually it looks awesome. Like, it definitely seems like they really hone down on like storybook fantasy and, you know, childlike imagination in terms of like the places they go. You see all these crazy things and stuff that happen. It honestly reminds me a little bit of the Raggedy Ann and Andy film, the animated one. Just given how the characters move, how the world looks, how the world is like kind of playful, but there's also like sometimes like twisted, dark undertones. It's very fairy tale like. The only thing I'm not liking about this trailer is that book character. I really don't like his design, and I think his voice is really annoying, and I think the character, I'm already annoyed by the character, simply put. I'm guessing they want him to be annoying, but it doesn't bode well when I'm already finding him annoying. But I'm really looking forward to this game. Hopefully it gets the love and support it deserves. It looks great so far, and I'm glad people are actually digging the game. And I wanted to mention it. It's a slightly smaller game, and it's I'd imagine it must be an honor to have your game showcased at the Game Awards, which will have millions of people watching your game. And that's pretty much it in terms of games I want to talk about. The Game Awards, like I said, I'm not really interested in the actual awards. I was more interested in the reveals. I'm a bit annoyed we didn't get to see a few things, but I'm not going to go into that as soon as it didn't happen. Let's move on to, I guess, TV shows now, because almost at the same time, Disney/Marvel decided to just release a bunch of trailers for their upcoming TV series on Disney Plus, a streaming service barely anyone has, understandably. And yeah, there was a few of them were quite interesting. Now, I'm going to say this right now. I have not seen Avengers Endgame. I have not seen it, and I don't know if these TV series are in response to the aftermath of Endgame. So if I'm getting things wrong, that's why. I have not watched Endgame. I'll watch it someday. But yeah, just a quick clarification. But let's talk about the first one, which I thought was quite interesting, and that's going to be Marvel's Loki. This one was announced way, way, way back. And a running theme with the next few Marvel trailers I'm going to talk about. Not really sure what's going on here. It seems that Loki is back, and he's kind of in like this weird secret agency, which kind of seems to be in charge of something. It's unclear for the most part, but the impression I got from it is that they're recruiting the help of Loki in order to kind of keep the balance with something, and he's going to be helping, like he's going to be a pseudo good guy to some extent, which is quite interesting. There were a few interesting things I did see in the trailer. I mean, Owen Wilson being a character was, very odd. Haven't seen him in a while. You kind of see Black Widow, who appears to be Black Widow in the trailer. Don't know what's going on there. But I kind of like this idea of Loki working with an ensemble kind of comedic cast. I'm completely forgetting the actor's name. He does work well with others in terms of like his performance in his characters. If you ever see him in character and out of character, it's very appropriate for him, and it does feel like they've kind of written the show or made the show around his strengths, and it does look like everyone's having fun on the show. But I don't know, it's interesting. Is it the kind of show I'd watch? Depends on if it's good, because there is so many streaming platforms and so many shows like this that kind of follow this pattern of like, group of, superheroes or characters. You got like The Boys, Doom Patrol, Umbrella Academy. They're unfortunately all starting to blend in. Obviously, I understand that things like, they mentioned Doom Patrol and Umbrella Academy. Those series were made, decades ago, in terms of like, their starting point and their finishing points. I know Umbrella Academy isn't quite finished yet, but it'd be interesting to see. I feel like this one's kind of going to get forgotten about, especially compared to the next one I'm going to talk about, which is Marvel's WandaVision. Now, with this trailer in particular, I don't know what's going on. Like, I really do not know what is going on, but I think it's kind of cool. If I remember correctly, it's pseudo-based on a comic book series that kind of had the same premise. I remember seeing the comic and seeing the front cover and being like, oh, that's a bit interesting. And this one is very odd. I kind of get the feeling that even people who, let's say, have seen Endgame probably don't even know what's necessarily going on in said trailer. But it is interesting. Having a Marvel property take this visual and stylistic approach of it being a, 1930s, 1940s setting of, like, the perfect ideal role model family in this, sitcom comedy role is quite interesting, especially when you have the juxtaposition of how the Vision looks, being this man who, as we all know, is, wearing a cape, looks like an alien or a robot, however you want to see him, and it is quite odd. I think the way they're kind of portraying the very stereotypical, like, 1930s, 1940s, ideal perfect wife kind of stuff, husband goes to work, I think they're doing a pretty good job in terms of performances. What exactly is going on is quite interesting. It definitely seems like they're in an alternate reality, like a coma-like state, which I think is quite interesting. I hope that this series is something that you can watch without watching Endgame, because I don't know, are they, like, supposed to be dead? Like, I'm guessing, I think you see a shot of the reality stone, or you see something yellow, and I'm guessing that's the reality stone. Is this, like, as a result of the reality stone? Are they stuck in an alternate reality? I don't know, but I think they're doing a pretty good job in terms of doing their research. They did really well. Like, I do like how, I guess, of the time and gimmicky the effects are. They're doing, like, very bewitched magic tricks, snapping fingers, magic's happening, things are clearly being moved by string. You can clearly see animation where they move things. I think it's great. It definitely seems like there's going to be some very, like, psychological, like, trippy elements. Definitely the other characters definitely seem to kind of be aware that something's not right. The whole, where the series is kind of losing me is when it kind of seems to be cutting back to present day, or what's really going on. That doesn't look as well, and I'm kind of hoping that that's not really a thing. Hopefully that is, it's hard to explain. I don't want it to be just all a dream. I want it to be that there was actually some kind of significance to what we were actually seeing and what they were witnessing. I hope it isn't just, oh, it was all a dream. But I'm pretty interested in this series, and hopefully it is enjoyable for the most part. Oh boy. Sorry about that. I had to make sure my laptop was still okay. I had a mini panic attack that it wasn't recording. But yeah, next Marvel trailer and last TV show we're going to talk about is the What If series. Now, the basic premise of this series is simple. It's what if this happened instead of that. So some of the examples they see is Captain America's soon-to-be or then wife. She becomes the, Captain America, or I don't know what her equivalent is. I've seen it before, but she's got, like, the British flag and the shield, and she's the super soldier riding on a Iron Giant-esque rocket, very Rocketeer-esque. You see that someone else is Star-Lord. It's a child who I believe is in Africa. He's now traveling the galaxy as Star-Lord. That should be interesting to see the kind of crew he then teams up with later on as the Star-Lord. Really interesting concepts. Like, one of my favorites that they showed off is, like, the evil version or a evil Doctor Strange. I've always liked that concept. There's, like, a zombie Captain America. Don't really know what that's about. And a few others that I thought were pretty interesting for the most part. I do like this idea of it. I think the animation is pretty good for the most part. It seems like it's a bit confused or lost in terms of what it wants to be stylistically. It seems like it's having a fight with itself to be comic book-esque and then CGI-esque with a style. I think it looks fine other than the lip syncing. That might be the last thing they haven't done yet. It did seem a bit off. But I think this is a perfect concept for a Marvel series, and this is the only kind of show they'd be able to do since they've established so much canon and so many characters that it should be really fun for a lot of audiences, both very familiar and unfamiliar with the characters, to see these alternative ideas. And equally, any one of these ideas could be their own, mini-series. I mean, hey, let's say people really, really, really like the, I don't know her name, the alternate Captain America. Maybe we can get, like, a mini-series of that, because I'm presuming each episode is on one alternate reality told by the Watcher. So I'm pretty interested in this whole series. Hopefully it's good. I really hope it's good because it looks like fun. Because comics can be quite confusing at points because they're always killing off their characters and bringing them back in the next episode or whatever, but I'm pretty down for this one. And we got 2 film trailers to end off this podcast. It's a lot to talk about, and this one is quite interesting, and that's going to be the trailer for Nobody. Not the best name of all time, but this one is interesting. It stars, I forget his name, but he's in Better Call Saul and a few other shows. It was a very odd pick for, I guess, the next John Wick, which is what they're going for. And the basic premise of this is very stereotypical. It's, I used to have a past, I put that all behind me. Basically I'm John Wick, but they're definitely doing something that's a little bit more interesting. I like this slightly more reserved and internally frustrated character, like you do see in the trailer, home intruders, and he didn't do anything. You can kind of see him alluding to this anger, this rage building up inside him. He's like punching a brick wall and he takes out all those guys. I think that's an interesting concept to kind of show a character kind of struggle a little bit more with this internal conflict, whether he wants to return to a life of, brutality and murder, I don't know. But it is an interesting aspect, and I do like that this one is taking itself a little bit slower and a little bit more comedic in that sense. Like the character, he's definitely a little bit more aged. He's maybe not of his prime, but he's definitely still got it. And I do like that. It definitely is a little bit more comedic. I mean, there is a line where he's, literally screaming about he wants the kitty cat bracelet because obviously, you messed with his daughter, and stuff like that. I think that is what's really going to help it elevate from just being a John Wick clone for the most part. But I am digging it. I think it's very well shot. The combat is quite interesting. I didn't even know the actor was capable of a lot of these moves. And I think in interviews he said that, he's kind of been, training for this role. I don't know whether that's like, PR fluff or whatever, but he definitely, you wouldn't suspect this man to kick ass, simply put. And yeah, I'm pretty interested in this trailer. Film. I hope that it is a good film, because other than John Wick, we haven't really had a good film like John Wick. There have been copycats, but they've never really reached that level of style and competence of John Wick. And this film, just from the trailer alone, looks like it's pretty close. But we'll just have to see what happens. I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this one. And the final trailer I'm going to talk about is the trailer for Sweet Home. Now, originally I thought this was just going to be a slightly more Japanese kind of crazy parody horror film. It looks like it's a little bit deeper than that. Not much to... it's kind of hard to read into this trailer simply because it's not necessarily in my native language. But it seems like... it definitely seems to be revolving around some kind of zombie mutation, infection kind of thing. And kind of taking almost like a note from the film Rec or REC, which is a great found footage, first-person perspective horror film. If you've never seen it, I would highly recommend that film, where we have a bunch of characters stuck in, it seems like an apartment block during said lockdown, or I don't really know what you call it. And I guess I'm also getting some hints of Train to Busan as well. But it definitely seems to go off the wall. Like, it's not just, the zombie outbreak. It seems like there's some kind of mutation or monster thing going on. Like, you see varying degrees of, like, practical effects and monster suits and gore. Like, there's some really odd and twisted designs. Almost like Deadeye Evil Dead kind of creatures. Like, there's this really weird gremlin goblin thing that has half its head gone. And I'm like, where is that coming from? Like... are people turning into that? Like, there's like a huge, massive, like, swole monster as well. It seems like the main character kind of gets infected, and it seems like there's an element of him maybe controlling the infection, or maybe using that to his advantage, or, whether his advantage being that, he's able to take out everyone secretly, or he's able to save everyone secretly. I don't know. But this film is definitely out there, and it's definitely really interesting. I hope that it isn't just style over substance. Hopefully there is, like, a good story. There's definitely good, like, use of lighting, cinematography, and all these other things, and the acting definitely seems pretty good. I mean, you had me sold from the practical effects alone. And hopefully it doesn't, how's the best way to put it? Hopefully it isn't just considered just another weird Japanese film. Hopefully or Asian film, however you want to refer to it. I'm really digging this one. A lot of good stuff has come out over the last 2 weeks, which is surprising because usually I'm done very quickly in terms of things to talk about. And yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. We have the video of the episode, which I can't give you the exact name of it because I was kind of waiting for it to release. But essentially, you'll see in the description in the download link, it's going to be something to do with the MF Doom cross Cookin album he kind of put together. He's kind of been slowly releasing the music videos. And I wanted to kind of throw something Christmassy, but something kind of odd and interesting out there. So essentially, rap meets Christmas beats. For the most part, so definitely check the link in the description down below for that. And yeah, you can also email me at raccoonplusfriends@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Angry Raccoon. There's only one C in the raccoon, although I'm probably going to delete my Twitter come the end of the year, so who knows. And yeah, that's pretty much the last normal podcast. I won't be doing any kind of trailers or talking about general news stories next podcast because it's end of the year podcast. And I'm gonna say this right now, I don't know when the end of the year podcast is going up. At the earliest, it's gonna go up on the 21st. At the latest, it's gonna go up at the end of the year. We haven't recorded it yet. We're trying to get everything done. I'm giving people as much time to finish off watching things, make their lists, write down any notes they want to do, as of this podcast going up on the 14th of December, I'm going to be writing said end of year podcast, all my personal stuff. I've got basically a week to finish off a few things before we start recording. So look forward to that. I doubt it's going to be as long as last year's podcast, which I believe was 3 hours long, but we'll just have to see. But hopefully you guys look forward to that. If for whatever reason you don't want to watch the end of the year podcast, I guess I will say have a good Christmas and have a good New Year. I'll see you in 2021. If not, I will see you in the end of the year podcast. And I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.